Ayer. In the event that you have never seen them, those are the Swiss Alps. I am in Switzerland, like an appropriate place to discuss the debate between Ayer and Arnie Naess. It's appropriate for two reasons. The first is that in addition to being a philosopher, Arnie Naess was a renowned skier, outdoorsman, alpinist, so he would have climbed, maybe not necessarily these particular Alps, but he would have climbed the Alps. I spent the day climbing the Alps. I have here, I will show you. I'm pressing it in a book. It is not going to be dry for a while yet, but this is Edelweiss. So those of you who know your Sound of Music, they of course sing that song Edelweiss. Edelweiss only grows above the tree line, very high up in the Alps. So I always deliver these lectures sitting, but right now I actually cannot stand. We hiked a lot today, but it's a great day. What could make it better? I can tell you what. It's talking about philosophy. Let's talk about Aaron Naess. A.J. Ayer, Sir Ayer. He is a logical positivist in the classical tradition of logical positivism. Now, we have, of course, another debate, one featuring Sir Karl Popper. Now, Popper is not, strictly speaking, in the same class of logical positivists. He's a positivist, but not in the same school as Ayer. Ayer is the quintessential member of the Vienna School. Okay, so remember, going back to your Vienna School kinds of defining characteristics, there's, I think, two things that are really, really important. The first is that Ayer is a strong believer in the verifiability principle. That is to say that he believes that if you cannot empirically verify a statement, it is nonsensical. Now remember, Popper is not that kind of positivist. Popper argues that if you cannot falsify, which is fundamentally different from verifying, you cannot falsify a statement, then it is a non-scientific statement. That leads us to the second thing that's really important about logical positivism and Ayer's kind of school of thought. If a statement is not scientific, in Ayer's opinion, then it is nonsense. Logical positivists like Ayer believe that a statement is either empirically verifiable or it's analytic. That is to say, it can be developed from or proceeds logically from empirically verifiable premises. So, for example, if we look at these mountains, there are places where we can see in the strata of the rock that at one time this rock appears to have been horizontal, that it appears to have been laid out by a fluid, flat magma, perhaps, or sedimentary rock, sediment in a lake of some kind, right? And then from that, clearly, we can extrapolate based on other empirical principles that somehow, in order to get something that is horizontal to crack and break and twist and now be up like this, that you have to be applying a pressure, a tremendous amount of pressure like that. Okay, and so from that, we can analytically deduce theories of plate tectonics from empirically verifiable data. That is scientific, that is sensible. Statements that are not either empirical or analytic, though, for the logical positivists like Ayer, are either tautologies, that is, they're just circular reasoning, they have no basis, or they're metaphysical statements. And both, my bus is here with my group that I wasn't with today. Tautologies and metaphysical statements are, for Ayer and for logical positivists, nonsense. Now, that's very different from Popper. Okay, Popper is going to argue that there are all kinds of sensible propositions that one can formulate that are not scientific, but just because something's not scientific doesn't mean it's not valid. So just because Ayer and Popper are both positivists doesn't mean that they belong to the same kind of way of thinking. Now, this is fundamentally different from Arnie Naess. Now, Arnie Naess is Norwegian. He's the founder of the deep ecology movement, and what Naess believes in is what we call set theory. Most of us are familiar with set theory in mathematics, and what set theory postulates is that you don't have one answer to a problem, you have a set of right answers. You also have a set of wrong answers, right? You know, everything that's not in the set. Well, traditional positivists like Ayer, would argue that a word, for example, corresponds to an object. Okay, this is a water bottle. It corresponds to water bottle, right? And although we may use water in different senses, we may use bottle in different senses, we may even use water bottle in different senses, the term water bottle, as it's being applied in this instance, refers to this object. In that sense, then, sentences are also names, like words. Sentences, though, name complex relationships. So Jim is drinking from the water bottle names a particular set of conditions. In order for that to be verifiable, there has to be me, Jim, there has to be a bottle, there has to be water in it, and I have to be actually performing that act. So, okay, now, the idea there is, in the essence of this nomenclature's view, is singularity. But what if we have a set of answers? That means that in any given word, there are a multiplicity of corresponding, a reference that it attaches to. That means for a sentence, we've exponentially increased the amount of things. And the idea behind this, what people like Naess argue, is that we never really have agreement on things. What we have is pseudo-agreement. What we have is a kind of close conjunction, but we're never really lined up. And this means that our knowledge is never going to be anything more than probable. As I understand Naess works exactly the opposite direction from positivists. He doesn't look for an empirically verifiable fact or truth. What he does is he states a proposition, which he wants to be true. I want it to be true that all killing is wrong. And from that, then he goes, okay, if that's true, what are the epistemological assumptions that are connected to it? What are the ontological assumptions that are connected to it? Hey, I'm redoing my lecture from this morning. I'll stop in just a second. So all kinds of things are going on there. So this is what, though, Ayer calls skepticism, right? The belief that you can't ever get to some objective truth that is true regardless of the individual in question. This is the anthema of positivistic thinking. So these two really are far apart. And if we would put, Ayer very firmly in that logical positivist camp, then we would put Naess in the interpretivist camp. It's very important part of that kind of philosophy. And this is one of the great debates that we have because it's a real live empiricist versus a real live interpretivist. There's two things that I thought were interesting in terms of com theory that I wanted you to kind of maybe reflect on. The first of them is this notion of identity, and the two get to that somewhere in the pages of the 40s, I guess. For Ayer subscribes to what he calls the passport theory of identity. That is to say, like, I am Jim, right? What makes me Jim? Well, when somebody says, hey, is Jim here? I'm the one who puts my hand up, right? And that I, went to Rapid City Stevens High School, and then I went to Black Hills State University, and then I went to, right? Like, that's all the same Jim, because it's the same person. I'm attached to the same birth certificate. I'm, empirically the same. And this is even really before we had a concrete sense of DNA, but he probably would have said a DNA theory, that you have a DNA strand that corresponds to a particular individual. That's what defines them. That's what makes them them. And that there would be, hypothetically, or at least the possibility, that there are enduring aspects of that person that don't change. Now, for Naess, remember, Naess does not believe in that. And Naess doesn't, it's not so simple as, oh, we grow and change, we become different people. It's the idea that there is no such thing as an individual person. There is no I, there is no self. We are, all of us, particles in a field. We are therefore inseparable from the other particles within that field, and we have no independent identity from them. So, somebody tries to kill me in an alley, well, I can't kill him back and cry self-defense because there's no self to defend. But also the same field that created me in the position of attacked and the other one in the position of attacker, like, how do we decide which one of the particles is to blame? Like, no raindrop causes the flood, no raindrop is innocent in the flood either. So the idea that somehow I have a right vis-a-vis the other person to take their life, that simply doesn't exist for Naess, because there is no independent sense of self. So I want you to reflect on this notion of identity, among other things that you may come up with in the reading. The second thing is on consistency. Now, Ayer does not want to get bogged down in looking for universal capital T truths. He's a man of action. He skis, he mountain climbs, he does these things, right? He acts. But what makes Naess is the actor, right? What makes Naess special in this sense is that he believes that our philosophy, whatever our calm theory would be, in this case for us it's a calm theory, it must be consistent with the way we act, the way we believe, right? If you believe certain things about communication, then you need to be practicing those things relative to communication, right? If you believe certain things are ethical in this kind of abstract theory of ethics, then you would by definition be living by those principles, right? And if you're not living by those principles, then they're inconsistent with what you're espousing over here on the other hand. So you've got to have consistency, and it's an absolute consistency. That's Naess's standard. Now notice it's very different from Ayer's. Ayer is looking for empirical verification, but Ayer is saying, listen, there's no reason why my personal philosophy has to be consistent with my theory of matter, my theory of motion, my theory of the way light moves across the sky. Why does it have to be consistent with my moral theory? That doesn't, but see, that's the idea. Logical positivism is comfortable with compartmentalizing and looking at small ideas. It's not good at connecting necessarily to all kinds of ideas, certainly not different ideas connected to one another. Whereas interpretivism, because it's not looking for capital T truth, can connect all of those ideas better, even though it can't prove any one of its one propositions. So those are my ideas. Those are the things I was thinking about. I'm enjoying the Alps. I'm going to probably put my feet up and try and relax for a little while and talk to my family that just got back from their day. So thanks, everybody. Hope you're having fun with the lectures. Bye-bye.